Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of South Cambridgeshire District Council Scrutiny and Overview Committee. My name is Councillor Stephen Drew. I am chair of the committee. May I make a few housekeeping announcements? Those present, including any members of the public observing or any public speakers, are asked to note that this meeting is being filmed and live streamed. By your presence, you are deemed to have consented to be filmed and to the use of those images and sound recordings for a webcast. May I please remind members that when speaking they should not disclose any personal information of any individual, as this might infringe the rights of that individual and breach the Data Protection Act. Please make sure your microphones are switched off unless you're invited to speak. For those participating remotely, when you're invited to address the meeting, please make sure your microphone and camera are switched on, and then when you finish addressing the meeting, please turn your microphone off again. Please, for members who are attending remotely, indicate a wish to speak through a chat message in the Teams meeting. Those present in the chamber should indicate their wish to speak by raising their hand. I will ask the Vice Chair to note the order of speakers both virtually and in the room. Committee members present, I will now invite each of you to introduce yourselves. Members, after I call your name, please introduce yourself and say which ward you represent. As I said earlier, my name is Councillor Stephen Drew and I am one of the members for Camborne. My Vice Chair is Councillor Graham Cone.
And I'm one of the members for the Fen Ditton and Fulbourne ward.
Thank you very much. Councillor Libby Earle. Thank you. Councillor Sue Ellington.
Councillor Sue Ellington, only member for Swavesey ward.
Councillor Peter Fane.
Evening, Peter Fane, Shelford ward.
Councillor James Hobro.
Good evening, I'm James Hobro, I'm the councillor for Foxton ward.
Councillor Helen Leaming.
Hello, I'm Helen Leaming, I'm one of the members for Camborne ward.
Councillor Judith Rippeth.
Good evening, I'm Judith Rippeth, I'm one of the councillors for Milton and Waterbeach ward.
Councillor Richard Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, colleagues. I'm Richard Stobart. I'm the member for Girton, one of the members for Girton, and also representing Madingley and Dry Drayton.
Thank you. Councillor Dr. Aidan van der Weyer.
Good afternoon. I'm Aidan van der Weyer. I represent Barrington and close by villages.
And we have other members present in the chamber online. Councillor Henry Batchelor.
Afternoon, Chair. Councillor Henry Batchelor, Lead Cabinet Member for Environmental Services.
And Councillor Bill Handley.
Good afternoon. Bill Handley, one of the members for the villages of Over and Willingham.
Thank you very much. I don't believe there are any other members present who I have missed out at this stage. No. And we also have with us several officers. Liz Watts.
Good afternoon, Chair. Members, Liz Watts, Chief Executive.
Bodhi Hassan.
Good afternoon. Bodhi Hassan, Head of Service.
Thank you. Dee Wood.
Good afternoon, Dee Wood.
Lee Hillam.
Good afternoon, Lee Hillam, Principal Operations Manager for Environment Services.
Thank you. And Marco De Luca.
Good afternoon, Marco De Luca, Principal Operations Manager for Waste.
Thank you. And Ian Senior.
Hello, and I'm Scrutiny and Governance Advisor.
Thank you. And Andy Francis.
Thanks, Chair. Andy Francis, Elections and Democratic Services Manager.
Thank you. And Jeff Membry. Sorry.
Members, Jeff Membry, Head of Transformation, HR and Corporate Services.
And Peter Maddox.
Peter Maddox, Head of Finance.
Thank you. I don't believe there are any other officers present who I've missed out at this stage. Okay, thank you very much. I can confirm the meeting is quorate, there being at least 4 Scrutiny and Overview Committee members here in the chamber. If at any time a member leaves the meeting, could they please make that fact known to me so it can be recorded in the minutes. Finally, reports of this meeting will be presented to Cabinet on the 15th of May. As neither the Vice Chair nor I is likely to be at that meeting, is there any other committee member willing to present that report? Okay. At the moment, we do not. We shall maybe come back to that later in the meeting. It is always the hope that is made in each meeting. So, apologies. Do we have any apologies for absence?
We do. We have apologies from Councillor Tom Bygott and Councillor Sally Ann Hart.
Yes. I'm also aware that Councillor Bradnam is coming to us from another meeting and will be joining us, but maybe a few minutes late. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Members are required to declare the existence and nature of any interest which affects or relates to any item of business to be considered. An explanatory note for councillors is included immediately after the agenda sheet. Councillors, does anybody need to make a declaration of interest in relation to any items on the agenda today? I do not see any. Okay, thank you. Item number 4 on the agenda is the minutes. Does anyone wish to raise any points of accuracy about the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of March 2023? No, if I can just pause for a second. Okay, I would like to make it clear that certainly wasn't a mistake on the part of Ian, seeing that was a mistake on the part of my understanding. But I turned the microphone off so that I could ensure I understood. Thank you very much, Ian, as always. Although a public question was submitted, the questioner is unable to attend this evening and has therefore withdrawn the question. Therefore, there are no public questions to be asked or answered this evening. Councillor Rippeth.
I'm sorry, I didn't get my hand up in time. On the minutes, can I just abstain because I was absent at the meeting?
Thank you very much. So, unless anybody else has anything else to say at that point related to any of the items, we'll move on to the one major item for our agenda today. So as you can see, we are looking at collection changes, the future of waste collections. And it says we are being asked to consider and comment on the report attached in Appendix 1 and recommend it to Cabinet for approval with any amendments we think are appropriate. What we're going to do is we are going to ask Bodhi Hassan to give us a short presentation to begin with. We are then going to tackle questions in relation to one aspect of the report. We may, during that first set of questions, end up tackling the second section as well. If not, we may then pause and we may ask Bodhi to give us a little bit more information in relation to the issues to do with changes to household waste, unless it has been covered already. So, Bodhi, if I can hand over to you in the first instance for a short presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Andy. Just to try to set the context for the proposed changes to waste collection rounds. This is an exercise that typically any waste service would do about every 3 to 5 years. And it's 3 to 5 years because it's a function of growth. So how much growth happens over that period, or where there are any changes to be made to the collection systems. The last routes reviews that was done for the Greater Cambridge Head Waste Service was about 5 years ago. So we are quite overdue for growth. The slide here is just illustrating that. This is growth that's expected to happen in the Greater Cambridge area over the next 2 years. We're expecting almost 5,000 new homes between the next 2 years. In the last 5 years, and this graph shows that that growth is scattered across the whole area. It's not just focused on one aspect of the council area. The bigger blobs are the bigger concentrations, so Camborne, Northeast Cambridge, Central Cambridge, but the growth is happening across the entire district area. And that represents about 5,000 houses over the next 2 years. The other context is that we have had similar growth of more than 13,000 houses in the last 5 years. And putting that into context of the service, the domestic waste service has today 32 vehicles. We had 31 vehicles 5 years ago. So the scene is that the service has catered for quite a lot of growth without a corresponding increase in the input of resources. We've done that by the very, very sort of clever work of my team here, nothing to do with me, in terms of being able to rebalance, redistribute rearrange rounds. So for instance, in Trumpington last July, we had a change in collection day, just to move the collections from one day to the other. We've done that in a very innovative way. We've had quite a bit of underground bins for the newer developments, so that saves collection vehicles. All that has been done quite effectively. But we're now at the point that we need to do a very thorough review and just also to prepare for what's to come. So the other context is national trends, national policy. We know that in the next 2 years, we'll be mandated by government to begin to collect food waste separately. We also know that we are very likely to be asked to collect residual waste on a 3-weekly or if not more infrequent basis very soon. We know that we may be forced down the line of actually having 6 collection bins at some time soon. That was meant to be announced a few weeks ago, but was put off till the next few weeks after the elections. So there's a lot of changes coming forth from national government. So what we're planning to do is optimize our systems now. So redistribute the rounds, optimize where we collect from and how we collect them, so we can make sure that we're as efficient as possible and best placed to prepare for the growth that's going to come, but also the change in services that's going to come as well. And one of the options we're also looking at is the 4-day week. How can we do all that, but also not just cater for growth, but also explore via trial how we can deliver the service over 4 days, which is the content of part of the reports. So thank you, Chair. That just sets the scene of how we've arrived at the conclusion we have proposed today.
Thank you very much. So, councillor colleagues, who would like to start us off on questions, and then we'll work through our list. Councillor Richard Stobart, your hand is up first. Councillor Cone will check for other hands as we go along. When we're asking questions, councillors, we will note that in the report it is very detailed in terms of the paragraphs that are through there in the executive summary. In the other sections, it goes through about number 50. We then have Appendix A and Appendix B. It tends to be easier for officers and cabinet members answering questions if we're able to reference the specific paragraph, if at all possible, unless, of course, our question is very general across the whole range. So if we could reference the paragraph, that would be much appreciated. Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you. So my question concerns the general methodology that's been adopted for doing this quite intricate optimization process. So if I do refer to anything, it's on agenda page 13 and paragraph 4, results from the route optimization exercise. So I'm interested to know from Bodé and the team, what kind of methods have been used? Now, we could get very technical here, but I think at a kind of layperson level, it would be very useful to know what methods have been used, where that kind of appears in, if you will, a kind of spectrum of possible methods. You know, is this kind of Europe-wide or worldwide kind of technique that's being used? And what's the experience gained? And how could that be more widely applied, perhaps? And then as we look a little deeper into the methods, what are the possible side benefits of being perhaps a little more intricate in the way we both acquire and handle data? So I hope that's clear.
In the first instance, I will go to Councillor Henry Batchelor as the relevant cabinet member, and obviously I'm sure he will most of the time pass over to the relevant officers, but in the first instance I will go to Councillor Batchelor, who can then decide to answer or pass over if he wishes to. Councillor Batchelor.
Sure, thank you. I mean, if it is a very detailed question such as that, I will always be handing to officers just to prepare everyone. But I think the answer will be that the service themselves didn't actually undertake the route optimization. That was outsourced to a professional company that does this professionally. But as I say, I will hand over to officers behind me to go into the full detail of that.
Thank you. Bodé.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll have a go first, and if there are any more detailed questions, my very capable team here will add some more detail. Thank you for the question, Councillor Stobart. So like Councillor Henry has said, we are working with external consultants called ISL Limited, Integrated Skills Limited. They're a technical consultancy firm that has done this sort of work for numerous councils in the UK and abroad. They use a computer model called RouteSmart that's used internationally, not just in the UK. It's also used not just for municipal services, but for logistics such as Royal Mail distribution. So it's a very, very well-known software. And the way this works is that it basically gathers mapping data in terms of where are the bins located across the council area and also where the house is. That's a starting point. So we gather data from our housing colleagues and mapping data to see where the bins are. And then also, our vehicles are equipped with in-cab systems. So every day when we go out to collect, we actually know how much waste we're collecting from each area, how long it's taking us. All that information is stored in in-cab data software on our vehicles. Essentially, what they then do is integrate all that and then prepare a baseline. What we then do is we refine that baseline by checking that what the computer is predicting actually matches what we're collecting. So for instance, a vehicle comes to Camborne area, comes to Gamlinge, it returns to the depot after 7 hours, 8 hours, and it collects 10 tons. We amalgamate all that for that day, and we see whether the results that the model is predicting matches what we have collected over the weeks, over the months, and then we try and fine-tune that. Once we then have a baseline, we are then much more comfortable to then use that baseline to then predict what else we can do. So if we add 2 or 3 more vehicles, can we shorten the time? If we are to add 4,000 houses, how many more vehicles do we need? So that's the essential of how the model works. We develop a baseline, and then we run different scenarios to now try and test different approaches to the collection, which is what we're doing now. And that's how we've been able to see what's possible by working over 4 days rather than 5. For the future, there's quite a lot of use that we can put the models to. So for instance, we can test if we were to collect food waste weekly, how many more vehicles would we need? If we were to collect the residual waste, not every fortnight, but every 3 weeks, how many less vehicles would we need? We've tested all those scenarios. But also beyond that, I think for some of the policies that we know are going to be mandated, for instance, deposit return schemes, where we'll be repaid for empty containers, we can potentially use this model to test where are the best locations to begin to collect empty containers. So there's quite a lot of use that we can put these models to once they're developed and fine-tuned. And I think even beyond waste management, the fact that we know what receptacles are in each house and where those houses are, we could have some future uses for this data as well. Anything else?
They're just checking if they've got anything.
And of course,
else to add.
growth as well. Growth is a big thing. So we can better cater for growth as well. We can know when we need to introduce new rounds. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Stobart, do you have a follow-up, or are you happy for us to move on?
Well, I'm grateful for the answer and for the illustration of the potential and the fact that several factors can be considered within the scope of such a model. I think the team is modest. Choosing a good consultant to work with is difficult, and they've obviously chosen well, and there is a degree of expertise in that which we ought to be acknowledging. So, Chair, thank you for conveying the question.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam, welcome. If I can just ask you to introduce yourself now that you've joined the meeting. So, Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for being late. I'm Councillor Anna Bradnam, and I'm one of the members for Milton and Waterbeach Ward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Next up is Councillor Peter Fane.
Thank you, Chair. I was fascinated by that short presentation. In particular, the thought of having 6 different waste collection bins, because I noticed a report from last March that consumers were already finding recycling rules too confusing. Strangely enough, that was a survey by Barrett Holmes last March. But also, UK has got to do a lot more to improve waste collection. We are, it's unfashionable to make comparisons with Europe. We're 11th, I think, on the list of recycling rates, ahead of Norway. And some of the additional measures are listed here, food waste in particular, some others in Appendix A. Sorry, Chairman, you asked me to mention page numbers, but I'm sure Mr. Hassan can remember which page number that is. Thank you, 27 apparently. Helpful comments from there. The point I'm making here is that this is complex enough already. if we're going to succeed in increasing our recycling rates, it's probably got to become more complex. I mean, we have an appalling record in UK on recycling of e-waste. I believe, since I've started on European figures, we're bottom of the European League, except in 2020 when we came second bottom. We've got a lot more to do on that, but this, and of course it's not all about who collects it. But I wonder whether this framework is sufficient to take account of all of the additional measures that may be required of us over the next few years, and if it seems reasonable that it isn't, we have to build onto it, how we do that without becoming too complex.
Councillor Henry Batchelor.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a political perspective, obviously we as a council want to be as green as we possibly can. It's one of the core values that we have, splattered all around the walls of this particular building. Recycling is a big part of this service, and it's something we want to encourage. Obviously, the more difficult that is made for us as a service by legislation that is put to us, we have to move with the times. We're not as good as some of our European counterparts. That's accepted. I will say the trial that we have been running for the last 3 years that recently ended, whereas by some villages in the district we've been asked to collect food waste separately, was largely successful. People did take to using the food waste bins correctly. So adding more bins is never the solution. So I'm sure as time goes on, there will be a more streamlined way of collecting all the waste separately and in as fewer bins as possible. But yeah, in terms of specifics, I will, as usual, hand over to the officers. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. And I think you're absolutely right for that point. I think the comment I would like to make is that what we're tackling seems to be at the middle. So if we imagine a hierarchy, at the very top is before waste is actually produced. So there's a whole series of activity to do with reducing waste so that it doesn't become waste, circular resources economy. So there's quite a bit of work we're doing on that in terms of engaging, educating, increasing awareness of the public so they don't produce waste in the first instance. So this bit is the collection when it's actually produced, which we're now trying to optimize. And then once we've done that, there's a limit to what we can do by ourselves alone as a district council. The larger part at the bottom of the pyramid is then treatment and disposal. And for those two ends, we're working very closely with our counterparts across the Cambridgeshire areas and, of course, the disposal authority, which is Cambridgeshire County Council. This year, we're going to be revamping the recap waste strategy and tackling all those three parts of the pyramid, but with particular focus on the top bit. Because the bottom bit is going through, you may know, quite a lot of change because the County Council is locked into a very long-term PFI contract now that we're now trying to unravel. So the focus for this year will be on how much we can begin to change behavior at the end of the pyramid, whilst we here are optimizing the middle bit in terms of collection, and then over the next few years, beginning to embark on a way of developing new treatment solutions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fane.
Just to say thank you to both for a very comprehensive response.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ellington.
Thank you, Chairman. I suppose I wanted to start really at something a little bit more fundamental. And on page 14, under the recommendations, it notes that any agreement to trial a 4-day week will need to be approved by Cambridge City and presumably Huntingdon. And I wondered what our relationship was like with our fellow districts and whether we were actually posing them some really significant problems. And the second part to that is if our bin men, excuse the term, but if our bin men decide that they're working 4 days a week, why can't they go the extra day a week as an agency for one of our fellow district services? And how are we handling this relationship? Because it could be really nasty for all of us.
Okay, so two parts there. Councillor Henry Batchelor,
Thank you. So in terms of the relationship we have with Cambridge City, obviously we are a shared way service, so it's not only South Cambs, the service is shared across two authorities, us and Cambridge City. It has been easier for us in South Cambs to essentially get to grips with getting the bin crews on a 4-day week because all of our office staff have been on a 4-day week since January. It is more difficult to get say, Cambridge City's head around the idea, I'll say, but they are essentially bought into this, and they're going through this very process that we're going through now through Scrutiny and their version of Cabinet, this at the same time frames that we are. It also has been put to the crews themselves as well as the unions that represent them. Feedback has been generally positive about the proposals. So I think fundamentally it's not an issue. I mean, obviously working 4 days does free up the bin crews one more day, so if they did want to go and work a second job somewhere else, whether that's an agency, they're more than free to, as I will say a lot of them currently do now, given the fact most finish around midday, so then they go off and do something else already, so that does free them up to, you know, take on further employment should they want to do that. So I hope that gives you more of a higher level view of the service. But yeah, if there's anything more in depth any of my colleagues can give us, then I'll pass over to them.
Anything to add on that?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just add a few things and I'll pass on to Marco, so I'll give him the heads up about the operations crews. I think district council colleagues actually looking to us to pioneer this. Historically, we've led the way and they've been very, very keen to support us. So for the 4-day week, we actually have a colleague from Hunts District Council being a critical friend and challenging us on the approach. So he's working with us on that. We have, as an authority, we are at the forefront of many things. So for instance, we were the first to introduce electric vehicles. We were the first to use HVO for our vehicles, hydrotreated vegetable oil, biofuels. We were the first to try out food waste collections. And we've pioneered that. We've gone ahead. We've learned the lessons. We've shared that widely. So I think we do have the support of the district councils around us and the county council. In terms of the operatives, it's a risk, but we hope and trust that the benefits will far outweigh the risk in terms of we're asking them to work a very, very short extension of time every day, 30 minutes, but also have the benefit of a full day off to do something different. Quite a few of them have families. Quite a few of them are already very keen to spend more time with their families, doing something different. So hopefully it's a risk that the benefit of having a full day off would not be negated by them going to work for another district council. We sincerely hope not. But I'll invite Marco just to shed some more light on the feedback we're already beginning to get from the operatives.
Marco.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so generally our operatives have been really positive about the proposal. They see it as a very exciting opportunity to get an additional day's rest, obviously, and potentially, if they need the finances, to work an additional job. I used to work for Cambridge City Council. Obviously, I joined South Cambs District Council as part of the merge. So I still keep in contact with some of the Cambridge City employees. And I've spoken to a few of those about how they feel about us going to a 4-day week. And they're quite positive. They think it's good that hopefully we're going to lead the way and that'll have a domino effect with other councils. And we'll lead the way and then others will join on when we see it's a success moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ellington, come back to you.
Well, it sounds very positive. Watch with care.
Thank you. Absolutely, thank you very much. Councillor Rippeth.
Councillor Ellington has kind of covered my question. I was just going to ask more generally how negotiations were going around the 4-day working week. And also, is it really possible to make that not compressed hours, but genuinely a 4-day working week when it comes to bin collection? Sorry, Councillor Batchelor first.
I'll hand to officers now. It'll be easier.
Sorry, yes, Bode.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll invite Dee to speak to that in just a second. It's not easy, I'll preface. We've identified a concept that involves just working 30 minutes extra every day. That will buy us quite a lot of time with 2 additional vehicles as well. But we'll still have quite a detailed phase to go through. we have upwards of 300 rounds that we're going to prepare in detail. But we are quite comfortable with the idea that we have now. And over the next few months, we're going to be working that up in detail. I'll invite Dee to just add a few more comments to that.
Dee.
Thank you, Chair. So we have actually, in the modelling stage, in a very early modelling stage, looked at many, many different scenarios, different options. So we haven't just gone into it looking at just a 4-day week. We've looked at things like, could we model 4 days over 5, for instance, and looked at other councils. So we've done quite a lot of research, gone out to see what other people do also, because there are quite a few 4-day week collections out there. But for us, I think we found that this was the best model based on affordability, based on mainly on the staff well-being. So that's what we were focused on when we came up with this option.
Councillor Rippeth.
Okay, yeah, I can see it's quite a tricky balance to actually get, and it is, after all, a 3-month trial, I presume, to assess whether it can work. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Libby Earle.
My question is along the same lines, really. I was looking at the tables of...
Libby, have you turned, sorry.
I was looking at tables on page 18, 16 and 17, which contrast the well-being of staff before and after the 4-day week. I'm wondering, actually, with the new rounds and the new way of working, is that valid? Because we're actually now looking at the existing rounds and the existing workload being compressed into 4 days, when we're actually looking at a more complex waste collection, more housing, more bin lorries to be staffed. And I'm wondering how that actually is going to impact on staff health and budgets, and has that actually been fully considered, that we really are still sucking it to see with 4-day week and an increase in workload and complexity to go with it. I wondered if Councillor Batchelor would like to comment on that.
Councillor Batchelor.
Yeah, so I know as part of the optimisation, it has taken into account growth. I think we saw Boday's slide at the very beginning of this item. It also takes into account increases in crew numbers, increases in vehicle numbers. I think most people know we have one more electric bin lorry that is due to be with us hopefully any day now. It has been held up somewhat, but hopefully it's with us. We're on the verge of ordering another one, and obviously we do have our regular fleet as well. So, yeah, I think the answer to the question is yes, growth has been anticipated and built into the figures, along with the 4-day working week pattern. But yeah, if officers can add anything to that, I'd welcome it.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Harry. Maybe I'll invite Lee to add a few comments as well after me. But I think just to maybe give some reassurance that in reality, the total workload that we expect people to do over the week would not increase. So it's the same workload for the typical 5-day working week period, but then it's going to be done over 4 days. And the difference is we're going to have a few more vehicles to make that happen, and then actually ask people to work an extra 30 minutes every day. What we expect is that the full day of rest will more than compensate for that extra 30 minutes. And at the moment, quite often, when we do have, for instance, after a bank holiday, some of the bins are heavier, people actually do work a bit longer, because you may have noticed on some rounds we're unable to complete because the vehicles are full, they have to come back, they go the second time, we run out of time. So already people work a little bit extra every now and then without any detriment to their health. So we're hoping that we can strike this balance by introducing more vehicles and redistributing all the loads across the entire area, and just asking for that 30 minutes, but then having that full day of rest, that the overall workload will not be significantly increased, and there will be a net positive benefits to employee well-being. Lee's health and, or Marco, okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
Marco.
thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to add to that, 30 minutes added to the working time in a day equates to roughly 150 200 waste containers being collected. Currently, our organic waste teams, they already work the same duration in a day. They do an extended hour a day. Under the new system, it'd work up to 30 minutes with a driver doing 30 minutes extra. So we already have crews that are working those hours, and they get additional time within the winter to compensate that. And generally, morale seems high. They seem fine working those additional hours. Other councils are actually doing longer working days than what we're going to do, because obviously they're compacting theirs full 37 hours into the 4 days, which they're actually doing longer working days, and which our crews will be doing. So in terms of working time, they're actually, you know, over the week, they're doing less hours. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Earl?
Just to ask the final bit of that, if we are collecting food waste separately, is that going to be a separate round, or is that going to be done at the same time as another round?
The Bachelor?
I think it would be a separate round, so it needs to be collected in a separate vehicle, because you have to separate the food. That's the purpose of it. But yeah, if someone could confirm that, I think that would.
Bodo? Marco?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so the food waste collections will be done in a separate vehicle, completely separate crew, smaller vehicle, so less emissions, etc. So yeah, one vehicle, one driver and one operative as well, unless we're in like high density areas where we potentially have 2 loaders and 1 driver collecting the food waste. Where we dispose of it is obviously we don't know yet, would be the answer, depends on the facilities that we can use.
Okay. I have Jeff Membry's hand up, so before I come back to you, Councillor, I'll just let Jeff add something to this.
Yes, just to reassure Councillor Earl that after the end of the waste trial, if it's approved, we will be undertaking a wellbeing survey of the waste staff to see whether or not we get the same results as we have with the office-based staff. So we will have the same sort of data for waste-based staff once the trial is completed, so we can see whether or not the same impact on wellbeing applies to both.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Earl.
Thank you very much, that's fine.
Okay, fine to move on. Okay, Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. And my question is rather similar to that of Councillor Earl, but slightly different. And I'm reassured by Jeff Membry because my thought was, I'm sorry I missed Bode's presentation at the beginning, but my concern was if we're asking our staff to do longer days, and I appreciate that's only by 30 minutes now, so that's helpful, when they're working, in order to give them a day off, I'm just slightly concerned by the fact that we know that our long-term injury rates are already higher than in our other departments at the District Council, and so I'm concerned that we may get increasing injury if we're asking our staff to do a longer day, or indeed, as others have pointed out, they might go and work for another authority on their day off. So what I'm concerned about is we need to be monitoring their health because any injury that they might incur might be incurred by doing work over 5 days, even if it's not for us. So I just wanted to check whether we're going to do that monitoring of their welfare and make sure that our staff aren't inadvertently putting themselves at risk by using obviously they're entitled to use their extra day for whatever they choose, but if we need to be mindful if that's causing a risk of greater injury.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Batchelor?
Yeah, thank you. So obviously the waste crews do have the highest rate of injury and absence because of the nature of the work that they do. It's a very physical, demanding job. So yeah, I know obviously the waste service has lots of things in place to help monitor and hopefully prevent that. There's huge amounts of training they go through in how to operate the service professionally and to cause themselves as little damage as possible. But obviously given the nature of the work, that will always happen and that will always be a risk. In terms of monitoring, yeah, obviously if we are going to trial this, I mean the two things that we would need to monitor would not just be performance, but obviously health and well-being of the crews as well, because if it is turning out that it is causing having a negative impact on the crews, then that would have to be, something that we consider. But in terms of how that's monitored, I will pass over to Jeff or one of the officers behind me.
Bode.
Thank you, Chair. Can I invite Lee just to comment on the health and safety aspects as well?
Thank you. Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you'll probably be aware that we've done some other changes to the waste service over the years, especially with regard to safety. So we was one of the first councils to allow our refuse staff to wear shorts, which is quite pioneering in waste, really, to be able to do that. So the changes that we're proposing may have an impact, just as Councillor Bradnam has said, with musculoskeletal injuries and things like that. We've also had other changes to the service, like we allow the staff to wear trainers, which is obviously safety trainers. But for all of these things, including these changes, we have to keep our eye on what the outfall is to those decisions, because although today we allow our staff to wear shorts and trainers, the statistics that I monitor myself may in the future change our mind, and we may have to go back and decide that that's not a good decision, because if the stats are showing that we're causing more injuries to staff and there's a concern, then we have to review it, and we should always be prepared to do that, and that's what we do at the moment. So I don't see that. I think that we need to keep our eye on it, on musculoskeletal injuries with staff. I think that the half an hour extra a day is marginal. I don't think it will cause too much of an issue, but you are correct, the injury rate is higher in waste. So it's something that we need to monitor, just like we monitor all of those other innovative things that we do in waste. And I'm sure if something presents itself, then we'll react accordingly to it.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else. Yes, Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I find that reassuring. But can I ask, will we know, and I ask it that way because I said myself, our staff are entirely, it's up to them what they do on their day off. But I just wonder, if we do see an increase in injury, just suppose, I'm not saying we will, but would we be in a position to know whether they were using their non-working day to work elsewhere, and if that might be having an impact on them? And I'm not seeking to be draconian about this at all. I just wondered whether we would know whether that was likely to be influencing their health and well-being.
Councillor Batchelor.
I suppose unless they volunteered that information, it'd be difficult for us to know what people do on their day off is their choice. We can't be prescriptive in that. If they want to take a second job, doing the same job but elsewhere, then as far as I'm aware, they're allowed to. So yeah, I think the answer to that would be we wouldn't know unless that information was asked and then it was volunteered. But yeah, unless any of my colleagues can counter that.
I think Councillor Henry is absolutely right. There's no way we're going to know. But I think just sort of anecdotal evidence, it's unlikely that they will go and do another waste collection job. We know from colleagues that do have another job. They mostly work in a pub or in a restaurant. It's not the same kind of job that they do. So I think it's unlikely but not impossible. But we will never be able to know. And hopefully they won't go and take another waste collection job. I think Lee wanted to come in as well.
Lee?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to say that there are two means of being able to test that theory, and one is that there is a disclosure that staff are supposed to make to say that they have got an additional job. So that is an HR policy for staff to do that, and some staff choose to do that at the moment, and we are aware that other people have got jobs because they've disclosed it. Secondly, there is another means to do that. Unfortunately, it only falls towards the drivers because we have to monitor drivers' hours. So the staff are required to put a card into the vehicle that measures the time, their driving time for us. But our analysis also takes into account if they insert that card for other use as well, so with other organisations. So it's a responsibility of ours to check that and make sure that our drivers are not driving too many hours. Thank you.
Councillor Bradnam.
That's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask some questions, please, about page 22 and page 23. That's paragraph 43 through to paragraph 48, please. So my first question is, in the two sections, it mentions requiring 2 further vehicles. Are 2 further vehicles in total required, or is it 2 vehicles required for the 4-day week and 2 vehicles required for growth? That was my first question. And related to that, will these new vehicles be standard vehicles or will they be electric vehicles? And then moving on.
Should we do that question?
Oh yeah, let's do that one.
I sense your questions are going to be a series of complicated ones, so it might be good to break them down as we go along. So, Councillor Batchelor.
I'll ask officers that one.
Okay. Bode.
Thank you, Chair. So indeed, yes, you are correct. There'll be 2 vehicles needed for 4-day week and an additional 2 vehicles needed for growth. The 2 vehicles for 4-day week will be now. The 2 vehicles for growth, we don't think we're going to need them until about 15, 18 months from now. And at the moment, they're not intended to be electric vehicles. They'll be conventional vehicles, but then there'll be vehicles that we can use biofuel for HVO.
Thank you.
Councillor Leeming.
Thank you. So the vehicles which are needed due to growth will be funded by Section 106, presumably. And I'm looking at the costs in paragraph 43. The phrase that the costs will be charged proportionately to South Cambs and Cambridge City it's not quite clear whether the figures that are presented are the full costs or our share split. Is that possible to clarify, please?
Councillor Batchelor.
I'm going to pass backwards.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So the full cost of 132k, that's for the entire service. So that cost will then be shared across South Cambridgeshire District Council and Cambridge City Council in the proportion that the framework has already been established. It's about 51-49%, roughly about that. Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Leeming.
Thank you. And are these costs a mixture of revenue and capital? So in paragraph 44, it mentions capital costs of £430,000 being required across both councils. It's just not quite clear how the costs are sort of spreading and which bits are capital and which bits are revenue. I don't know whether that's something that could be expanded on when this perhaps goes to Cabinet, that sort of fleshed out a little bit more so that it becomes more transparent, please. I think.
Sorry, Councillor Batchelor.
Yeah, I was just going to say yes. I'm sure that can be expanded when the full paper does come to Cabinet. Absolutely.
That's fine.
I'm sorry, before we move on, is it possible to answer Councillor Leeming's question at the moment? I don't know if any officer is able to answer the question that she's asked related to capital as opposed to revenue and this £430,000 mentioned in point 44. Come to Bode first,
Thank you, Chair. And yes, thank you for that comment. We've actually improved on this. We've now presented these figures in a tabular format. So the figure of 132,000, that's revenue, and the figure of 430, that's capital. Right. So we've split them clearly into a table that shows revenue and capital in the report that's going to Cabinet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Leeming.
I think that's it actually for me. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cone.
Thanks very much, Chair.
Anna. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. My question was on the timing of the introducing the 4-day working week and whether it's the right time to do that, given that the cycles that the head of service alluded to at the beginning. So normally we would review and reevaluate the service every 3 to 5 years, and currently we're 5 years out from that, so well in need of that service to be reviewed and reevaluated. Will we really get a true comparison if we are evaluating or comparing a service that is 5 years out from being reevaluated to what we see with a 4-day working week? Are we going to get a true comparison, or do you think it would be better to introduce the 4-day working week at a later stage when you've re-evaluated the system in its current form to get a more true comparison?
Councillor Batchelor.
Yeah, okay. I think I'll pass to officers on that one, if that's okay, Chair.
Okay. Bode?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. I think the reality is there's never a perfect timing for anything. But the timing we're working to actually, it's quite fortunate for several reasons. One is that we do need additional vehicles, and this is going to be a trial. We want to be able to do this trial without incurring too much significant cost on a permanent basis. Quite fortunately, we have 5-6 new vehicles arriving in June. So the 2 additional vehicles that we need, we don't have to incur any capex. So typically, a service like ours, which is quite efficiently run, will replace our vehicles every 7 to 8 years. So 4 or 5 of those vehicles, then in the year 7, they still have a little bit of life left. So luckily, we can actually get 2 vehicles for at least another year for free without having to pay the capital cost. So in that way, the 4-day week trial benefits from not having to incur any capital cost. The timing is also right because we know, like I said at the beginning, there's a lot more changes to come from national government. The one that we know is going to happen in the next 18 months, 2 years is mandating the weekly collection of food waste. If we can optimize the service now and actually get 4-day week going, we actually then have a full working day that's available to use. We will also have the capacity of some of those vehicles on that non-working day. So I think quite a few things work in our favor with this timing at the moment.
Okay. Councillor Cohn.
Thank you for that answer.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hobro.
Thank you, Chair. I actually have 4 questions, and I think I'll ask them one at a time, if that's okay. The first question is it's about the 4-day week trial, and specifically about the comparisons with other 4-day week arrangements and 4-day week trials in the report. And so that's page 16, paragraphs 25 and 26, which talks about the office-based South Cambs trial, I think, and page 19, paragraphs 29 to 31, which talks about 4-day week experiences with other councils. So, I mean, my observation in reading all of that is that quite a few of these examples are rather different from what is proposed here. So, of course, the office-based trial is fundamentally different from a bin collection round trial, and many of the potential efficiency gains in an office-based trial are very different from the potential efficiency gains for a bin collection trial. So I suppose I'm feeling rather cautious about the reference there, because I think it's difficult to take lessons from one example and apply it to another. More specifically, there are references to several other councils who've operated 4-day week arrangements, and the comments are that some of them are clearly condensing the same number of hours into a different number of days, creating very long hour days. So our proposal is different from that. So really my question is, are there any other councils that have adopted an arrangement that is very similar to the one that we're proposing? And if so, are you able to sort of make specific reference to those examples and their experience, as opposed to this much larger collection of examples, many of which are quite different from the arrangement that we're proposing?
Councillor Batchelor.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely agree that the office-based trial that's happening here is a lot different to that of the refuse collection team. That is, they're 2 completely different types of work. So, appreciate they have been contrasted in the report, but in reality, they are 2 different work streams. I agree with you there. In terms of other local authorities that are currently doing it that we can compare with, I don't have any examples off the top of my head, but I'm sure colleagues behind me will do for you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. And I think I said at the beginning that we are pioneers in this. We wish we could learn from somebody else. In reality, we haven't come across anybody else in the UK or elsewhere who's done this. So they know there's nobody we can learn from at the moment. But we have actually learned from those who are doing 4-day week in a different way. Like Dee mentioned, we explored 4-day/5, which is the pattern that others do already. That will have involved a lot more vehicles and therefore more expensive. But also people that actually do 4 days, their crews are working longer hours. So again, we know that other people are working 40 hours over 4 days, and therefore if our crews are working 32 hours, we are much more comfortable that it's less likely to result in injury because others work much longer. We've also learned from them in terms of what's the best day to choose. So at the beginning, by default, we actually thought that the best day to avoid was Monday, or, well, I keep mixing it up, that we work on a Monday. We're not settled yet in terms of whether the best day is Monday to Thursday or Tuesday to Friday. But we're learning examples from others, how they have picked which day to be a non-working day and what the benefits are. So there's nobody we have been able to learn from in terms of the full working practices, but we have gained insight from people that are working 4 days in different ways. And I think the benefits of the office base, which is very, very different, is that we know that there are well-being benefits of having that rest day. So that's the main thing. And we know that staff actually go away and do other things on their non-working day that's then beneficial in terms of them coming back and feeling refreshed and energized to work on their working day. So that's the benefits of the office-based example that we have. But I think the other big thing is everybody wants to make this work. So we started this journey about November, December, and at the beginning we had there was no idea that was wrong. It was a case of encouraging everybody to think out of the box. We had some crazy thoughts like using drones to collect waste. So sitting down here and doing waste collection with drones, we've now been able to hone all those ideas into where we are now. So I think my comment is that whilst there isn't any roadmap to where we want to get to, we are all working on this collectively. And other councils, well, like I said, we have a critical friend in Hunts District Council that's all coming together to try and learn as we journey. And hopefully we're going to end up with a destination that actually is very, very effective.
Councillor Hobro.
Thank you. I think that's a really comprehensive answer. I now totally understand the situation. I hadn't quite understood it from the report, but I think that's very clear. Thank you. I have 3 other questions.
Please do, carry on.
Is that okay? Thanks. So my second question was more straightforward. So it was about the net environmental impact of the move to 4 days. And I think in the report there was a comment that there will be more bin lorries will be required, which of course is an environmental cost, but fewer rounds will be required, which is a saving. And I wasn't quite clear whether or not the net environmental impact, sort of full life cycle, taking into account everything around that, was positive or negative. And I wondered if that had been worked out, or maybe it's not clear. I just wondered if you could comment on that. Thank you.
Councillor Batchelor.
Thanks. Not clear to me at this stage, so I will ask officers if there's any.
Bode.
Can I invite Dee to respond to that, please?
Dee?
So with the vehicles, you'll save a day going out, but you'll collect a few extra bins. So there should be a saving because the vehicle won't have to travel the same distance. And then when you're looking at the staff commutes, we don't say it's 20% less emissions from staff commutes because I think the report acknowledges there is a displacement. So staff won't necessarily be at home all day. They'll go out and do leisure activity, for instance. So they will still use carbon emissions. They still will travel. So hopefully that makes some sense.
Okay, Councillor Hobro.
So I'm still not clear whether we expect the overall impact to be positive or negative. But if we don't know yet, then that's fine as an answer. But I just wondered what your feeling was about whether the overall impact is likely to be positive or negative.
I think it will definitely be overall impact negative, no question. We can't quantify it yet, but I think we know that 2 things. One, our crews not coming to work on one day. I hope they won't be traveling as much as not coming to work. That would not save them money. So some of them journeying from as far as Peterborough or beyond. So definitely they will save a whole day of not commuting to work. So I think there will be a savings there. But also when it comes to the vehicles, there will be a bit more vehicle journeys on some of the days, but overall, we will be saving at least 60% of the vehicle journeys because the bulk of the vehicles will not be going out on one day. So there will definitely be a net savings environmentally. We'll quantify that as we go forward.
Okay, Councillor Hobray.
Thank you very much. That's very clear. Thanks.
Okay, your third
May I
question.
ask the third question? So this was about the costs. Now, you've already commented on this, and it may be that you've already answered my question, but I wasn't quite sure, so I'm going to ask it anyway and hope that it's useful. So it was to do with the costs of additional vehicles related to the move to 4 days, and whether or not the overall increase in cost is a long-term increase in running cost, which we expect on a per capita basis, i.e. per capita for the population that we're serving, or whether these are short-term additional costs related to the additional capital. And I wasn't quite sure whether, I couldn't quite tell from the report whether those additional costs were temporary and would tail off, or whether we expected the additional costs to be built in on as additional running costs in the long term.
Councillor Batchelor.
I'll hand over to officers for that detail.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I think the figures quoted here, they are not temporary costs. So we've showed the cost for year 1, 132,000, and then year 2, 207. Those are revenue costs, and those will be more or less stable after year 2. However, in the medium to long term, we'll expect them to tail off. So like I said at the beginning, for instance, we know that for every 3,000 houses, we need at least one more vehicle as a rule of thumb for our service. In the last 5 years, we've only had net 1 or 2 vehicle increases in terms of to cater for a growth of 13,000 houses. So we've been able to absorb a lot of additional growth by really, really optimizing the use of the vehicles. So even though this will be additional cost for those 2 vehicles, we expect that we can then use these new rounds beyond the ordinary capacity and therefore save on introducing new vehicles further down the line.
Councillor Hobray.
That's great, thank you. So we're expecting the costs to tail off, and yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you, that's clear. Fourth question, am I allowed?
Yes, of course, absolutely.
Thank you. So this is very simple, really. I wondered what assumptions have been made in all these predictions about waste demand around the issue of overall waste reduction. Now, of course, we want to reduce the overall amount of waste that we're collecting, but we don't know how much we'll be able to reduce that by. So really my question was, are all the predictions in the report based on demand, I suppose, per household or per capita remaining constant? And so any waste reduction that we achieve, would that be a net improvement on the situation as described in the report? Or are there some assumptions in the report around waste reduction that are built in?
Councillor Batchelor.
Yeah, absolutely. We're trying to, as Bodie mentioned earlier, we are trying as a waste collection service and as a council here to encourage people to reduce their waste consumption. A lot of that involves human behavioural change, which is never easy, but that is what we are attempting to do. In terms of the detail you've asked for about how that number is calculated, again, I'll be handing back to the experts behind it.
Bodie.
Thank you, Chair. And it's a very valid question. The answer is we haven't made any assumptions on reducing the waste growth. We've assumed it stays the same. Otherwise, it should have been a lot easier to just say we're minimizing growth. No, we haven't done that. But what we have modeled is what happens if. So for instance, if we were to go down the route of not collecting residual waste every 2 weeks, but every 3 weeks, we now know that we will need so many vehicles, reduced numbers. So for instance, if we have 11 refuse vehicles now for residual, we know that if we are collecting waste on a 3-weekly basis, not 2-weekly basis, that will go down to like 9 vehicles. We have modeled how many vehicles we need for the food waste collection based on quite a wide variety of participation rates. So if we introduce weekly food waste collection tomorrow, and we assume we have a participation rate of about 70%, how many vehicles do we need? We have modeled all that. So we have all those data sets at our disposal. so that when those new services are now being introduced, we have a very good understanding of how we can make that happen, but also what the net impact will be. But we haven't used those for our model at the moment. We've modeled them, but for 4-day week, we are assuming the same waste production going forward. So any reduction will be net benefit, but it's unlikely to translate into any reduction in vehicles that quickly.
Councillor Hobro.
Thank you, that's all very clear, and it's really good to hear about all this modelling and the different scenarios. I can see that that's going to be tremendously useful as things change. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor van der Weyer.
Good evening. I have a few questions. I'll run through them. They're not sort of huge, complicated, detailed ones. Talked a little about the legislative changes that are happening nationally, and there's clearly some challenges there, some uncertainties around there. But there are some opportunities, and I think you've got a very good approach to that, to seeing what can be done there. In that context, there was a reference in the report about the fact that recycling rates have stagnated recently in the council. I was wondering what evidence there is at the moment that you have about the reasons for that, and whether that is something that we could look at specifically a bit more, possibly alongside this issue of overall waste reduction, because obviously sometimes it gets confused and the incentives go a bit wrong. But so that's my first point. Second one is sort of more of a presentation thing about the report. There's a good chunk in I think it's paragraph 28 about the benefits of the move to the 4-day week. I think it demonstrates a bit more sort of balanced discussion about it. Some sort of the challenges, disbenefits and risks sort of in a equal, sort of similar format would be helpful. I don't know whether that's feasible in type of the cabinet, but general comment. Also on the sort of implementation of the 4-day week here, you sort of started partly answering my question, which was, are you going to be doing just 4 days? So the office-based staff is sort of any 4 days among the 5 during the working week. But here you're talking about everybody doing 4 days, the whole service being 4 days. And that has both benefits in terms of vehicle servicing, for example, a bit more resilience. There are also disadvantages in that you have to have more vehicles. Have you looked at doing something more like the office where you're operating for 5 days but having staff doing 4 of those 5 days, or is it just not how the service works? And then finally, on the decision making, do we know much about the city decision making? Is that sort of scheduled? Does that have to happen in parallel to our decision making? I don't think there was a reference to that. I can repeat any of those questions. Sorry if they're one in one go.
Councillor Batchelor.
Thanks. I'll have a punt at 2 of those 4. So the way the report's presented, yeah, absolutely. If it's easier to present the benefits of the 4-day week when the paper goes to cabinet, I don't think that'd be an issue to change the way the information is presented. I think that's a relatively straightforward thing, if that's easier for people to read. In terms of decision making, I know the City Council's decision making is running as parallel to our process as possible, so it's going through their scrutiny process, which is slightly different from ours, and then also subsequently through their cabinet. So it is running as parallel as is possible. So they're not making this decision in a year's time, say. They're making it roughly the same time that we will be. And how the implementation of the 4-day week was calculated, i.e., people spread the work over 5 days over 4, or is it a prescriptive 4 days? I will hand that one to officers on how that was come to. And in terms of recycling rates and the evidence around why that is reducing, again, I'll ask the professionals for their view on that one. Thank you.
Bode and team picking up the range of questions.
Thank you, Chair. And just to give some additional context, we actually have some dates pending for the City Council consultation. So we have a meeting with the Scrutiny and Resources Committee on the 3rd of July. We've actually had an informal meeting already. Just came back to your questions. The recycling rates, it's a very, very valid point. And we have done quite a bit of research recently. I'll ask Dee to comment on that just after me. We know that we are now hovering about 52% recycling rate. We know that the top performing councils across the country that are in the mid-60 rates, they all have quite a few things in common that we don't have. So for instance, they all collect food waste on a weekly basis, and they almost all have a 3-weekly collection of residuals. So if your black bin is not being collected on a fortnightly basis, then you are forced to recycle more and fill your blue bin. So we know that those two criteria have quite a leapfrog impact on the recycling percentage. You want to add anything quickly, Dee?
Dee?
Yes, so on the benefits, it talks about the aim is to reduce agency staff and reliance on them. And if that happens, what it should result in is less missed bins, because at the moment we employ quite a number of agency staff that are not familiar with our rounds. And it does mean that they miss, more bins than if they were permanent staff. Now, obviously, if you reduce the number of missed bins, you will increase, hopefully, your level of recycling, because you'll be collecting more, and it means that people won't end up putting their recycling into black bins when the bins are missed.
Okay. Thank you. And then in terms of implementation, like I said, we're just at the beginning, and I'll be looking to Marco and Lee to crack that nut before I come back in a few days. We are going to be doing 4 days over 5 in terms of the back office. So for instance, what we're presenting so far is really about the domestic service. We have a trade waste service that has to run over 7 days because restaurants and pubs, they have collections at the weekends. So again, that will give an opportunity for people who are not working on 5 days, maybe to work overtime with the trade waste service. So because we have a service that has to be delivered over 7 days, we will have team leaders, the likes of Marco and Lee and our team supervisors working 4 days over 5. But also to give us that full balance, for instance, being able to service and maintain the vehicles on the day they're not being used. Our fleet manager, Robin, will likely be working on the day that the fleet is not being used. So the back office system will very, very much likely be 4 days over 5, but also the trade waste business will likely be, I don't know what the factorial of 4 days over 7 is or the reverse, but it will not be a 4-day service. So we are still working out those details, but not everybody working to a strict 4 days.
Thank you very much.
Okay, to move on, nothing else to add. Okay, there. Yeah, Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. So the question is around how the model will be validated once data begins to emerge. There is a model, and that will have the parameters, if you will, associated with what's chosen, what works. But as the data comes in, what is the process of, in a sense, reconciling what's seen in practice with what the model's predicted? And so how will that validation process work? So that's the first question. Second is around the type of vehicles. I mean, we have touched on electric vehicles and conventional technology vehicles, but there are other possibilities as well, perhaps hybrid, perhaps hydrogen fueled and so on. How do the vehicles and also their mode of operation fit into the modelling framework, and how quickly could that be updated if there was some data to indicate perhaps those vehicles are working less than optimally? I suppose you can't keep going back to the consultant and saying keep running this this model just to check this data to see that it's correct or to update a vehicle operation. So how does that work? How often will this assessment be done? So I'll stick to those two questions, one about validation, one about how vehicle technology type can be included in the modelling system that we've been discussing.
Councillor Batchelor.
Yeah, two very technical questions which I'm going to pass on.
Bode.
Thank you, Chair. I'll invite Marco to talk about the model validation process in just a few minutes, but I'll answer the second question first. So the ideal mix that we're looking for in our fleet is about 50-50. At the moment, we have an entire fleet, including the trade-waste vehicles, of about 45 vehicles. Our target is to have about 24 vehicles that are electric, and then the remainder to be a hybrid of vehicles that we can either use biofuel for or other more advanced fuel systems. So, for instance, we know that the electric vehicles are the ones that have the least range, and therefore they cannot go very far. With biofuel, there's no restriction on the range. So by the time we reach a stage where we have half our fleet electric vehicles, any advancements that come beyond that, we know it's better than the electric limitations we have. So for instance, if hydrogen becomes more viable, there will be no restrictions on how far a hydrogen vehicle can go. At the moment, we can't send an electric vehicle from our depot in Water Beach all the way to Gambling Gate. It won't be able to come back on the required battery charge. So we have a limited range. So we're limiting our electric vehicles to the range they can go, and not more than about half of our fleet. When the advancement and we have better vehicles, we know that there will be no restriction, and therefore it will be a like-for-like replacement and no need for any modeling after then. The challenge we have is that hydrogen vehicles are still quite expensive. They're more than double the cost of electric vehicles, so we still think that that's quite a few years away. But to answer the question, we are going to limit how many electric vehicles we have, and then beyond that, it will be a very simple like-for-like replacement. In terms of model validation, Marco has been through this with the service a few times, so if you can add some more comments on that, please.
Marco.
Thank you, Chair. So I think the important thing is the legwork that we put in initially to check the rounds before we even roll them out. So we have a piece of software called Dennis Connect, which tracks the rounds, speeds, times in and out of estates. They can enter the tonnages as they enter and leave estates. So what we're hoping to do is produce heat maps for the crews, rounds for the crews well in advance of us going live, getting crew involvement and engagement involved prior to the go live date, cross-checking all that data with the staff, making sure they're feeding back to us any issues that they pick up. I mean, the previous software picked up the river cams, a road in Cambridge, and we've done it in Cambridge City, so obviously that was highlighted early on, luckily, that you couldn't drive through that. Obviously, once we go live, we'll be relying on staff feedback, close monitoring of the crews, logging the detail on spreadsheets of amount of bin lifts. So our Dennis Connect software also picks up on bin lifts as well. It can feed that data back to us. We know how many lifts they're doing a day, how the mileage, as I said before. Then we'll cross-check with that information with our data team and make sure that the crews are actually doing the amount of work that we expect them to do, as much as just not looking at finish times, just assuming that the round's not achievable, cross-checking that information, feeding that back, cross-checking that data with ISL's data that they've given us before we go live.
Thank you, Mark. And just to add to that, we haven't nailed down a start date. So it's we expect that the detailed rounds will be ready by about the end of June, and then we're going to try and use the whole of July to actually review the rounds, going through the process that Marco has said. But if it takes longer, it's going to take longer. So we're not going to go live be comfortable that we've checked and double-checked that the rounds are actually doable before we actually implement them. So we will have quite detailed checks before we go live.
Councillor Stobart?
Say that, yeah, very satisfactory set of answers. I mean, validation is tricky because of the need to gather reliable sources of data, but Marco's outlined a process, which seems very solid. So, yeah, a good degree of assurance in those replies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bradnam.
Oh, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
My microphone is showing strange messages which I've not seen before. This is fairly straightforward. At paragraph 46 on page 22, in the middle of that paragraph, it says the estimated costs for the 4-day week trial, approximately 33,000 per council, would be funded from the service's operational budget. In paragraph 48, which is the introduction to the table, it says a summary of costs for both elements is set out below for the whole service, not split by council. And then it says the 3-month trial, the route optimisation of 4-day week is 33,000. So I'm not quite sure whether the 33,000 per council is mirrored in that table where it says 33,000 for the whole service. And that would seem to be either, if it's 33,000, it would seem that might be 15,000 per council, or only one council is going to do it first. So it's 33,000. Do you see what I mean? Are you with me? I'm sort of looking at Peter Maddock because I'm wondering if this is a money thing.
If I can come in, please, Chair. It's
right,
very...
Baudet has already got his red lights on. It's okay, Peter. Baudet's there.
Thank you for spotting that, Councillor Brandham. It's an error. That 33 should be 16.5. So yeah, that 33 split across two councils. Yes, so that's...
I'm glad I waited to speak another time because I just thought you want to get these papers right for Cabinet. Thank you very much. So should it be 16,000 in the table?
No, on paragraph 46, it should be 16,000 per council. So it's 132 for the year. So it's 33 for the 3-month trial. And then we split that 2 ways. So it's about 16K, 16 and a half for each council.
It's paragraph 46 that needs to be corrected.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Bradman? Yes, good. Councillor Rippeth?
Thank you for letting me have a second go. I think this is quite a straightforward question, I hope. Page 22, when it talks about paragraph 44, it just says, initially these will be absorbed, this is about additional vehicles within our inventory, etc. And then by retaining and extending our current vehicle fleet beyond the typical 7-year lifetime, etc. I'm just wondering, you know, what the risk is there with them breaking down. I know you'll have the Monday on which to service them. And I get the impression that after 2 years, should the 4-day working week continue, that then the costs will arise from buying new vehicles. Have I read that correctly?
Councillor Batchelor?
I believe so. I'm just having a read of it now just to double check. But no, I think it's pretty sensible if I hand over to officers to give you the detail on that.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you're correct. There will be a capital cost incurred when we need to buy the new vehicles, yes.
Okay, and you've obviously kind of risk assessed this. So like with the food waste collection vehicle, for example, it broke down, but I understand that was because it was 10 years old and on its last legs. But you've kind of
exactly
this
that.
is going to be, this will be working, and the time period can be covered by the slightly older fleet.
That's the plan. So the food waste vehicle, we're able to use it for an additional 3 years, and then it began to break down more right at the end of that year 10. So we're hoping that we get at least 2.5 good year service from these vehicles before we then need to replace them. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And Councillor Leeming, your hand has gone up again.
Thank you, Chair. This is going to page 27, Appendix A. It's to do with the sort of imminent changes coming through the government's resources and waste strategy. I was interested in the deposit return scheme point. Is that going to be something that will be a district council responsibility? Will that come under sort of our commercial waste setup, or would that be something that was dealt with by central government or by county? And I'm just wondering, I mean, it's such a big thing to introduce across the country. What sort of infrastructure would that involve? It's an incredible new thing to take on.
Councillor Batchelor?
A huge bit of work that would need to be done, and my understanding is it would be the collection authorities, i.e. us, that would need to that would sort of bear the brunt of that. But yeah, it would take a lot of planning. But luckily, that one isn't as imminent as some of the others. But yeah, if Officers Baudet, anyone wants to comment further?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chair. Indeed, just to add to what Councillor Harry said, it will likely be a district councils. It's still a bit of a time off, and the government is not quite prescriptive yet. Scotland was going to be leading the way. We were just announced last week, 10 days ago. Scotland has now postponed their own implementation. The government has indicated that there will be a need for collectors, so it's be open to everybody. But the people who already have the infrastructure, i.e. the vehicles, to make this happen will be the district councils, i.e. waste collection authorities. I don't think the government intends to put obligation on us to do that, but absolutely we see it as an opportunity. And because we have quite an efficient trade business, we'll be looking to get into that business of collecting DRS containers, yes, as part of our commercial waste service. But the framework is not yet finalized by the government.
Councillor Lehman.
Thank you very much for that really interesting answer. Thank you.
I have nobody else on the list. I have Councillor Stobart again. I was about to say it will therefore be me, but at the moment we have Councillor Stobart. If anyone else wishes to ask any questions, councillors, please be ready. Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you for letting me in at the last moment. It was just something around this discussion of ideas, concepts. I think in the modelling process there was talk of quite a lot of variance of the model, this exciting thought of drones, you know, being able to take away the waste and so on. But I just wanted to be sure that those ideas, however wacky, were going to be retained in the corporate memory somehow. So that apart from anything else, they're the things that we didn't choose and we know why we didn't choose them, or they're things that we could go to in the future and say, well, that was exciting and now the time has come. So I just wanted to comment on that and maybe just ask for some feedback that, yes, we've done that and it's kind of in the corporate memory.
The quick feedback is there was nodding while you were speaking, but we'll absolutely check. Councillor Batchelor.
Yeah, so I think that has been noted, and we are, as a service, always looking for new innovative ways to collect people's rubbish. And you know, as the drone idea has been now committed to film, we are it's now on the record. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure officers can explain further. But yeah, I mean, I don't think we're ever discounting anything. Is the truth of it? You know, if there is a new, more efficient, technologically appropriate way to collect rubbish, then absolutely it will be considered.
Okay, anything to add? No. Okay. So I don't see any other hands up. So therefore, I will come to myself. I have four sort of topic questions I want to ask. I have a couple of very short questions to begin with, which just need kind of quick number answers. And it may be Councillor Batchelor this year, but it may actually end up going towards Liz or Peter or whoever. How many hours on average, what is a full-time contract for a waste operative in terms of hours?
I'm going to hand to officers for the detail.
Okay.
37 hours.
37. What is a full-time contract in terms of hours for an office member of staff at South Cambs? And same. Okay. And then my next little bit is on the paper regarding how the 4-day week for waste operatives are being managed. You referred a couple of times, both in the paper and your explanation here, that the waste operatives would be asked to work an extra 30 minutes per day, Tuesday to Friday, isn't it? Because you're saying not on Monday, Tuesday to Friday. Will they be paid extra for that 30 minutes? Or is that 30 minutes effectively being taken off their Monday and put on to Tuesday to Friday? Councillor Batchelor.
So my understanding is there will be no change in salary. So the pay would remain the same, but they've been asked to work 30 minutes extra for 4 days of the week, with the benefit being a full day off at the end of the week.
So that brings me to my summation question in relation to that. Would it be fair, therefore, to suggest that as successful and positive and good as this plan may well be, that the waste operative workers are not being treated the same as the office staff at South Cambridge District Council in the introduction of the 4-day week? Councillor Batchelor in the first instance.
Interesting thought. I mean, I will say that the waste operatives are generally quite in favour of the proposal and what's been put forward to them. In terms of fairness, I will say that the waste operatives, when they learnt that the office-based staff at Camborne would be going to a 4-day week, their immediate question was, well, why aren't we? So I think the idea was always to trial the 4-day week in the waste service, but at the same time, as with the office-based trial, I think it's about a question around productivity, whereas the waste service is measured, as we've been discussing today, not wholly on productivity, but also on whether physically it was more strenuous to them. So there are the other points around that as well. But if it's just a question of fairness, I will say majority of the waste crews feel it is.
Okay. If that helps. Liz, your hand did go up. I don't know whether I was pointing towards Jeff on the screen or you were saying you wanted to speak.
I was going to volunteer to speak, but I think Jeff's far more competent
Jeff's
to
going
do
to take
so.
it. Okay, Jeff Membry.
Thank you, Chair. Because this is a trial, it's acceptable that they are working a slightly different model, because the whole idea of these trials is to test different models. If this were to move to a permanent arrangement across the council, then we would need to look to equalise the arrangements to avoid any allegations of unfair treatment. But it is perfectly appropriate for two different trials to have slightly different models to see which works best in different arrangements.
Okay, so in that case then, I take that as an entirely fair comment at the end, that as a 3-month trial, if something has been different at that time. But if we're then coming back to the purpose of us as Scrutiny looking at this report, one of the things is related to recommendations to Cabinet, and it strikes me that what you've just said there, Jeff, is not covered in the report. Because the report does not say that at the end of the 3-month trial, there will have to be a further review of the staffing, the hours, the rounds, or anything else. And one of the things that was said earlier by officers was that it is necessary to have the extra half an hour Tuesday to Friday, because that is the only way that the 4-day week can basically be made to work. I realise I'm slightly paraphrasing, but that was basically what was said. So therefore, I would take it from what you've just said, that assuming this trial goes ahead and is successful, and it is then made permanent, in order to ensure equalisation of treatment of all staff within the District Council under the 4-day week, it is going to be necessary for a further report and a further re-optimisation of rounds and a further investigation of how to organise this in order to take away that extra half an hour that waste workers are being required to work Tuesday to Friday, or it's going to be necessary to completely reappraise the office staff's work to add an extra half an hour in order to create the equalisation. I'm both saying that, and I'm asking that as a question, and if anybody in terms of either Councillor Batchelor or one of the senior officers would like to say that what I've just said is wrong, I am happy to be corrected, but that is my interpretation of what I am hearing. Jeff.
Yeah, I understand the report on the asking for an extension of the office-based trial refers to the fact that there may need to be amendments in light of the results overall. I think the understanding is this report today is just asking for an initial trial in waste, but yeah, both in terms of of this trial and if agreed an extension to the office-based trial, we would need to continue to review how the 4-day week is progressing in both arenas and decide where it's appropriate to make changes to equalise if we were to become a permanent a 4-day week employer. But that could be in either area.
No, absolutely. But just to finish off my point in relation to this, what it does mean is that we, as members of the council, need to be aware of the fact that this is not the end point. And I don't just mean it's a 3-month trial, but what is proposed here is by definition not going to be the end point, because if it's successful, there is going to be coming back to it. Okay, my second point is I'm struck by the conversation in relation to the fact that obviously though the waste operatives carry out physical labour, whereas our office workers, people such as myself who work in a school, effectively an office worker, do not. So therefore, by definition, we are moving the 4-day week trial, which, based on the data that's been provided to us so far, can be called a success, and we are transferring it into the waste operatives waste service, which is then a more physical service. I am struck by the fact that clearly there are, in some ways, greater problems of doing this, because the questions that have been asked by a couple of other members, Councillor Earl, for instance, Councillor Hobro, which have then been answered by officers in particular, have referred to the fact that it's going to be necessary to ensure that we monitor in every possible way the potential impact on the waste operatives of asking them to work longer. and we had it explained to us about the fact that it will be necessary to make sure that the excellent training, which Bode and others have referred to in meetings before, and I always think is a really impressive thing about protecting the health and safety of workers. But I am struck by that. So my question at this time to Councillor Batch in the first instance, do we have a responsibility to recognise that we are potentially creating conditions for our waste operatives in which our workers are placed at greater risk by working an extra half an hour a day, and because we are removing one of their working days and it has been accepted that they are likely to go, and some of them are likely to go and take extra work on an extra day, that we have physical workers who we're extending the working day of and who are then going to choose, as a result of that free time or their level of pay, that they are going to work an extra day. So would it be fair to say that we absolutely need to recognise that our actions are creating an extra risk for our employees? Councillor Batchelor.
So my view on that is that I don't think we're creating extra risk. I believe that if by asking the waste operatives to work half an hour longer, doesn't create any extra risk, but obviously there is risk with the job, so asking them to work more hours in the day is essentially, extending the period at which risk can occur. So I don't think we're creating anything extra by asking them to work half an hour a day. But obviously, the longer a crew works, i.e. the longer they're out on the road, lugging bins up and down the street, the more chance there is that they will suffer some physical damage. In terms of what they do in their day off, I don't think we as a council have much control over that. So if they do choose to go out and do another physically demanding job, as I say, I don't think that would be as a result of the district council asking them to work 4 days a week. That will be a personal choice they've made in how they spend their time off. That's my view.
Okay, but before I move to the officers, I just want to come back on that one then. Do we not have a duty of care as their employer when we have chosen to change the way in which their working structure is, that in terms of that duty of care of an employer, we have therefore changed their working time, which creates the opportunity for them to go and work on that extra day? I accept completely your point about his personal choice. Absolutely, people should be able to make their choice. But what I've heard from the conversation is we will need to monitor this and we will need to make sure that we are constantly aware of what they're doing.
So yeah, agree that it will need to be monitored, and I think as you've heard from officers and others, that is part of the plan as we go through the trial. In terms, and you are right, we do have a responsibility of care for all of our staff, and specifically people in the waste service who have a much more physically demanding job than the office-based. We do have a duty of care to them, and as we've also heard from officers, the care that is given, especially in occupational health, to our waste service is, in my view, excellent at the shared service. But yeah, as I said, I think my view is I don't think we're particularly adding to the risk. We do have a duty of care. I believe what we are doing is potentially extending a working day. Well, actually, if you think about it, we are actually reducing the number of hours they would be working in the entire week. So I suppose there's two ways to look at it. But I don't know if any officers want to...
Bode, is there anything you want to add to that?
Thank you, Chair. I think, like the team has explained, we actually looked at quite a few different options. And we've picked this not because it's the easiest by any means at all, but because on balance, we believe it's the one that gives us the best well-being for our colleagues. Because if we were to look at other options, it involves working longer hours, but also if you look at working 4 days over 5, it involves working longer hours as well. So I think we've picked this because the primary reason, apart from the benefits for cost, for retention, for recruitment, the whole reason for 4-day week is well-being of colleagues. Our opinion is that this gives the best well-being solution because they actually get a full day off and they're only giving back 30 minutes every day. So that's why we've picked this option. And I think on balance, like Councillor Henry said, it's almost impossible for us to control what they do on their day off. But I think our duty of care has been fulfilled by picking what we believe is the best well-being option for them. And yes, we're trying to encourage them to not to go and work on their non-working day, but I think on balance, we've done sort of we fulfilled our own duty of care. I think Lee wants to add something else.
Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to elaborate because when Councillor Bradnan mentioned about the health and safety concerns, we just dealt with musculoskeletal type injuries. And I just wanted to add some reassurance that even in the current circumstances, our waste workers work unusual hours. They work to a task and finish arrangement, which quite often gives them a significant amount of time in the afternoons to do the things that they want to do. And some of those things are extra jobs. So it's not uncommon for the staff to go and work for someone like Deliveroo or another organisation in the afternoon, in the evenings. We've even had colleagues doing taxiing and things like that through the night, which is not beneficial to us in the daytime because we see trends in accidents and stuff like that. But I just wanted to reassure you that those are the things that we look for, especially those points that I've just made. So we've actually found colleagues to be doing practices like that, and they're not doing them for light reasons. They're doing them sometimes out of necessity. But we do deal with that, and we do speak to people, and we do take their well-being into consideration for those things. We've found people who have been sleeping in their car and all sorts of strange arrangements due to their personal circumstances. So just like the health and safety side of things, people's well-being is at the top of our consideration. So we do look out for those considerations, and there's no reason under this plan why we wouldn't keep doing that. So.
Thank you. Thank you, the three of you, for that reassuring answer related to the work that I know that you do in terms of things. Okay, my third question will go to Councillor Batcher in the first instance. One of the things when the 4-day week was first introduced that we talked about and was mentioned to us was the idea of cost neutrality and the fact that the 4-day week would be a cost neutral programme, and I can recall sitting in meetings and hearing this. As far as I understand it, with the qualification that came from Councillor Bradnam's question, the 3-month trial will cost £33,000. The year one introduction of the 4-day week for the waste service will cost £132,000. Year two will cost £207,000. And within one of the paragraphs, bear with me one moment, within paragraph 44, it refers to the fact that there is a £55,000 annual contribution to vehicle renewal and replacement fund related to the introduction of the 4-day week. So I just wondered, Councillor Batchelor, where these extra costs for the 4-day week for the waste service should be interpreted related to the original suggestion that the 4-day week would be a cost-neutral exercise for the council.
So clearly for the waste service, it wouldn't be a cost-neutral exercise because you have to buy new stuff. So I think the cost neutrality is probably referring to the office-based trial of the 4-day week. Clearly, as you can see and have highlighted in the paper, there will be a cost to the service, which has been budgeted for, albeit it is an additional cost. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I suppose the answer is it wouldn't be cost neutral in the first instance.
Would you say that it is a valid investment on behalf of council taxpayers in South Cambs for an overall improved service?
Yes.
Yeah. My interpretation of it would be that what's actually happening here is we are improving the lot, as the gentleman said, regarding worker conditions, hopefully, with all the things that are in place, and then hopefully we can improve the overall service and the environmental benefits as an investment. Okay, and my final part relates to point 7D, which is to do with the Cambridge City Council and their needing to approve it. Now, that's been tackled a bit during the meeting, so that's absolutely fine. My final question in relation to that is, what is Plan B if on the 3rd of July, which is the date I think I heard Bode refer to for, yes, what is Plan B if on the 3rd of July, Cambridge City Council doesn't agree to do the 4-day week trial in the waste service?
So we need both partners, ourselves and Cambridge City, to sign up to it. As we are a shared service, we can't do one without the agreement of both parties. So I would sincerely hope that they, obviously, as we are doing now, it's going through quite a robust process, and it is doing so at the City Council as well. I know as the City Council aren't going through a 4-day week for their office-based staff, there has had to be additional work done for the members of Cambridge City Council to get them up to speed, as it were, on how things, on what the proposals are. So my hope would be that by the time we get to July and it does go to the Scrutiny Committee of the City, all the members will have had the opportunity to ask any specific questions they may have. Obviously, it will be scrutinised at the Scrutiny Committee as well, and then it would then go to the City Council's Cabinet for a decision. So my strong hope would be that it wouldn't fail at that stage, but, as you say, this is politics and anything can happen in that at the end of the day. So, in terms of plan B, if the City Council decided not to go with it, then my understanding would be it would fall and we wouldn't continue with the trial, and we just continue as we are now.
Would it be fair to say that the Waste Service and yourself as the relevant Cabinet member would have gained benefits from the optimisation review and process that you've done?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. I'm struck by the fact that it has to get through it, but listening to all the things that you and others have said this evening, there's clearly so much work that's gone into this, and I think it strikes me that collectively, both yourself and the officers behind you have clearly looked at this kind of afresh in perhaps a different way to which you would have done otherwise by trying to make it work for the 4-day week. And I feel that can only be of benefit to the service and to council taxpayers in South Cambs generally, even if our City Council colleagues were to decide that it wasn't for them. But as you say, Councillor Batcher, let's hope that that isn't what happens. Okay, excellent. So that brings us to the end of the questions in relation to the report, which was point 6 on the programme. So therefore we move to point 7 on the work related to the work programme. And in the first instance, if I can go to Councillor Stobart and ask for an update on the work of the Task and Finish group working on youth engagement. Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an update. You recall from last time we were busily engaged in, if you will, interview discussion programme with various groups. So I'm just going to say a little about that, but I'd like to start this report with a comment on the methodology. Now, for a group such as this, we do need to have a methodology to deal with the kind of things that we're learning in a rational way that we can explain, so we are accountable for the kind of process that we're going to use. But it will be fairly straightforward. So on the advice of colleagues in the group, the ideas that we kicked around at the last meeting, what we'll be looking for is themes. So those themes will be supported by evidence, so things that people have said that have got reinforced, perhaps through several different meetings or meetings in different contexts with different people. We will be looking to, in a sense, identify what those themes are and associate evidence with them. There may be themes that we expected that didn't show up, and there may be themes which are rather thinly supported rather than richly supported, but we will identify the difference between those. But one of the first thing that we will do once we feel that we've got the evidence to hand is to get together as a group, identify with the help of officers themes, and then associate evidence with those themes. So that will become the, if you will, framework from which or within which a report will be then produced by officers. So that was what came from our last meeting, and I'd perhaps invite comment from committee members in a moment. Two other meetings that we had a very useful, quite brief but quite intense and informative discussion with the planning service, representatives of the planning service. And just a couple of things that came out of that, which I think are worth noting, is that I think a more robust and direct engagement with young people who wouldn't naturally be drawn to consultation with the planning process would be appropriate. I mean, we kicked that idea around a little bit, and you could say that in some of the things the planning service has done, then there has been a kind of useful interaction between the planning service and perhaps local schools in an area where a development is taking place. But something that has, in a sense, a richer technology strand and a more if you will, robust presentation of the planning process to young people's groups. Now, therein lies a big challenge, and I think the planning service is already stretched, and to add a great deal to their workload would be inappropriate. So we've got some work to do in there to, perhaps come up with some recommendations that are reasonable, actionable but reasonable. I think one area that we might want to explore is going from the specific, in other words, engagement with a particular group concerning particular development, to something that's a little more generic and applicable, that actually reduces the workload of members of the planning service and yet yields very good results. The other thing I think John Dixon mentioned was that we think of it as the planning process as a series of consultations, but some of them are quite rigorously enforced and statutory. And so we have to understand, I think, in the way we deal with the planning service, the way we interact and discuss, that there are areas of flexibility and areas that are quite rigid. So that, I think, was a useful piece of context. I did subsequently go and talk to Waterbeach Action for Youth. That's a quite well-known kind of youth club group. And I spoke to the 14s to 18s with the help of a couple of the youth workers, and very helpful kind of discussion. They did sit down and they talked to me, which I think was quite an achievement. And we were talking about a whole variety of things, but just to give you an idea, the notion of hanging out, which is actually a consistent theme. I mean, it pops up in almost every situation where we've had the discussion with young people. Space to hang out, which is initially perhaps retail space. So where's the fast food? What kind of fast food? So we had quite a discussion about whether Five Guys would fit with some of our Newtown concepts. And one of the things that they were saying about Five Guys was, it's too expensive. You know how much fries cost at Five Guys was one of the questions. And so that notion of a kind of healthy fast food, if it's not a contradiction, is somehow getting lost. But Space to Hang Out couples quite nicely with a concern that we've been building about how young people build social capital. And that leads on to other things like co-housing and some of the things we talk about in regard to development of communities and so on. So there's some useful themes and tips coming out. So I will go back to...
Can I just stop you for a second? Thank you. Before you leave, I just say that at the end of the meeting it was my intention to particularly thank our waste services team for their time here this evening, but as one of them is getting up to leave, which is, no, it's absolutely fine, because we are done with you, but I just particularly wanted to acknowledge the contributions this evening of Bode and Dee and Marco and Lee, which was really, really helpful, and really appreciate your time. But as you were getting up to leave, I wanted to do it before you left. So thank you very much, and thank you to the three of you who are still here. Sorry, Councillor Stobart, I interrupted you.
Yes, nearly done. Sorry, I'm taking a little longer than I thought. So I will, fellow members of the group are very welcome to join me. I will circulate a date, talk to the younger group. So that was the 14s to 18s. It's quite a challenging group to engage with, but they have got a lot to say. And I think, Councillor Drew, you yourself you've had that experience with the school groups you've engaged with. And then just on voting, civics and politics, we could have gone on for a long time talking about civics and politics, and we get that kind of surprise on the part of that age group when you start talking about the real world of politics, that kind of disbelief. But that's something for another time. Just to finish off, we've only had a very limited discussion with commercial organisations, and I would like to have at least one other for us to consider. So Tracy Brockman and I had a chat about that, and we've got a little action plan to see if we can find another organisation with which we can engage. So that's a kind of update, and I'm ready to take some questions if anybody has.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone has any questions for Councillor Stobart at this point. This is usually the point at which Councillor Heather Williams will ask us a question. But obviously Councillor Heather Williams, I don't know if Councillor Cohen, you have anything? No? Okay.
Just to say thank you for leading the task and finish group and all the work that you've put in. I know it's been quite an extensive project, sort of coordinating lots of people, so thank you for doing that.
Councillor Bradnam, I saw your hand.
Thank you. I was just thinking about engaging with young people in a commercial situation. And I just thought one of the ways you might possibly consider doing that is, strangely, via the Farmland Museum, because the Farmland Museum looks at the history of agriculture in our area, and there might be learning modules that could be, you know, there might be a way of engaging with school groups, for example, who go there, and actually thinking about how trade has changed over time might actually be a way in to engaging with those groups. I'm not saying it would be ideal, but it's just a suggestion.
Thank you. We are constantly looking, aren't we, Councillor Slobart, at ways to go forward.
Thank you, Councillor Bradnam. And in fact, the Farmland Museum may well be, I know there are relatively few such cultural spots in South Cambridgeshire, but actually a view of that kind of heritage education location, and the activity around it may very well be helpful, because there's a lot of youth engagement associated. So, thank you.
The reason I suggested that is that they're a captive audience when they're there. So, but also sometimes schools might appreciate understanding that somebody there might deliver something for their students that they can prepare in advance for, but then somebody else can have an engagement with them. It could be useful both ways.
Okay.
So in regard to that particular point, Councillor Bradnam, I think we'll note it. We may not be able to do something for this first report, but I think that's one of the things we should note that we haven't done, and in a sense hold it for the next generation of stuff that we'll do, and there will be a next generation. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, and thank you for the update, Councillor Slobart, and all the work you're doing, as Councillor Cone said. The other part of this item is just talk in terms of our forward plan. You'll be aware that the meeting on the 11th of May 2023 has actually now been cancelled, and it's been cancelled because there is simply nothing at that point in the work of the council which it is suitable for scrutinising. We have done postponements before, but we have lots of items on the agenda, but it simply doesn't actually fit in terms of where we are, so that meeting has now been cancelled. You'll see there's a meeting on the 8th of June with a number of items. The meeting on the 20th of June is specifically related to the local plan. At this point in time, that meeting has been postponed as we are awaiting that work to be completed. That meeting will come back on to the schedule at some point. Hopefully it will come back on before we get to, say, the end of July, but we will obviously await any work that needs to be able to be done at that point. Yes, sorry, Councillor Cone, I'm not sure if your hand was up, you were just pointing. And then obviously, as you can see, between meetings between myself, Councillor Cone and in Senior, we have planned forward on meetings at the moment through to January 2024. New things can be added, but we are trying to work as far ahead as possible so that our work schedule and programme is done for that. Our next meeting is on the 8th of June 2023, and that is at 5:30 p.m. for when the new council year starts. The timing of the meeting moves back by 10 minutes to 5:30 after conversations with various people where it was felt that would be more efficient and easier. It is only 10 minutes, so we haven't done it as a huge, great big debate, but we have moved the meeting back by 10 minutes for simplicity. And as everyone knows at this point, I always turn to Ian and I check that we haven't missed anything. Ian, is there anything we have missed this evening that we need to do?
Could you just get committee information on the waste collection?
Indeed so. You see, Ian, this is why I always turn to you at the end of the meeting, because I've forgotten to do possibly the most important thing. Okay, so based on the discussion that we've had, colleagues, and based on the points that have been made and the notes that Ian would have made for the report, can I ask for affirmation that we agree to move the report forward to Cabinet with the comments that have been made? If I can have affirmation on that.
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much, everyone. As ever, my apologies for getting the very important thing. And I hoped we would be 2 hours, and we have done almost exactly 2 hours. Thank you very much, everyone. Meeting is now closed.